I can't control Paris Hilton. I mean, she can go where she wants to go, but she was not part of the festival. The festival had nothing to do with her.
In 2025, a leaked piece of news from inside Paramount sent shockwaves through the entire film industry. Robert Redford, at the age of 88, suddenly announced a list titled "The 7 People He Despises Most in Hollywood." What left everyone stunned was that this list did not feature unfamiliar names, but rather some of the most powerful stars, figures who had once stood beside him on the big screen as friends, colleagues, and at times even as if they were soulmates. Yet, in real life, these individuals had inflicted upon him wounds, contempt, or a profound fear so deep that he vowed never to work with them again. There was one who had stolen the most important role from his girlfriend. Another had deliberately sabotaged an entire film he himself directed. And there was also someone who had mercilessly buried a 4-decade-long friendship with nothing more than a single cutting remark. So, who exactly are they? And what could have driven Redford to finally expose a secret he had kept buried for so many years? The answers are about to be revealed right now. 1. Clint Eastwood, quietly sabotaging a Redford project, just because of political differences. The conflict between Robert Redford and Clint Eastwood did not originate from artistic disagreements, but rather stemmed from opposing political views. As early as the 1970s, Redford had become a symbol of the left in Hollywood. He opposed war, actively advocated for environmental protection, fought for LGBTQ+ rights, and openly criticized President Ronald Reagan, calling him a dangerous actor disguised as a politician. In contrast, Clint Eastwood was a prominent face of the conservative faction in the American film industry. He had appeared on national television to express support for Donald Trump, while frequently mocking progressive movements, calling them the farce of weak and overly sensitive people. For this reason, when Redford was preparing to release the film The Divide, a work exposing the naked truth about money laundering schemes between politicians and the U.S. military after the events of 9/11, Clint regarded it as a blatant insult to his America. According to Richard Langley, Nally, a former production director, who had collaborated with both actors, Clint secretly called a Republican congressman who had previously served as a defense's advisor, warning that the film posed a risk of disclosing classified information that could endanger national security. Just 1 week later, Universal's legal office unexpectedly received a subpoena from an internal intelligence agency demanding a review of the Divide script to assess the risk of defense-related data leakage. Of course, that was merely a pretext, yet it was enough to halt the project. Redford was drawn into a 3-month-long interrogation, unable to shoot the film, cast actors, or find any investors willing to provide funding. It did not stop there. According to a leaked confidential report published by the LA Times in 2013, Clint even hired a friendly media company to spread the rumor that Redford supported anti-American organizations in the Middle East. And the rumor spread widely and even appeared in internal FBI files, turning Redford, a man who had spent his life making art guided by conscience and principles, into someone considered for the first time as a potential security threat. The climax came in 2007, During a private meeting of the Directors Guild of America, DGA, Redford spoke out against the Bush administration's immigration policies. Shortly afterward, Clint secretly provided a recording of Redford's speech to a right-wing newspaper. The article deliberately edited the audio to make the public believe that Redford had called U.S. soldiers pawns sacrificed in a political game. An immediate wave of outrage erupted. Veterans burned Redford posters outside theaters. Conservative organizations collectively sent letters demanding his removal from any project connected to public funds. The Texas state government, where he had planned to borrow a studio, also revoked the permit overnight. Redford could not sue, as everything had happened in the shadows, leaving no evidence. But he knew full well that Clint had triggered this domino chain. The final decisive blow was Clint's direct call to the CEO of Universal, with a chilling threat. "If you dare make that film, don't expect me to cooperate with this studio anymore." As a result, the divide was permanently killed. In a brief 2015 interview with The New Yorker, Redford bitterly spoke about Clint. "When a man believes that patriotism means silencing all opposing viewpoints, that is not loyalty. That is fear." And if Clint was the first ghost he had to confront, the second was completely different, quieter, colder, yet no less cruel. To Marlon Brando, "You're just a decoration for white Hollywood." In March 1974, just 3 weeks after the most controversial Oscar night of the decade, at a private party for cinema legends, Robert Redford walked into the ballroom of the Chateau Marmont Hotel. His familiar calm face and restrained smile were just as usual. He had recently received an additional invitation from the Academy to join an advisory board aimed at discovering and mentoring young talent. The press, meanwhile, continued to hail him as the purest face of modern Hollywood. Yet the moment he extended his hand to greet Marlon Brando, who had just refused his Oscar statuette and sent a Native American actress to accept it in his place, everything took a sharply different turn. Brando did not shake his hand. He stared at Redford for exactly 3 seconds. Then, as if delivering a slap without using his hand, he snatched the European film promotional poster from Redford's grip and tore it apart in front of the crowd. No shouting, no explanations. Only Brando, with a voice deep, dry, icy, and as sharp as a blade, leaned toward Redford's ear and said, "Listen, you're not an artist at all. You're just a flashy ornament for the white Hollywood system that I despise more than anything in this world." Not everyone heard clearly, but Redford did. And that memory never faded from him. Years later, veteran journalist Peter Biskind recounted this story in his memoir, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, as a bloodbath without a drop of blood being shed. Brando's words were not just a simple insult. They resembled an indictment from the very man Redford had always kept a respectful distance from, both gracious and secretly admiring. And from that night onward, the rivalry between these two American cinema legends quietly began, needing no sensational headlines, yet lasting for 3 decades. It unfolded through subtle blows, nameless attacks, and private matters only the people involved could understand. Some believed Brando was jealous, as at that time studios and directors were courting Redford for leading roles rich in depth and political weight, territory that had once been Brando's alone. But for those truly close to Brando, the disdain did not stem from professional rivalry. It came from genuine hatred. In 1976, at a press conference in Berlin, Brando bluntly said, "Actors nowadays just need to be handsome, wear a turtleneck sweater, and look a little sad to be considered profound. Yet none of them understand war, injustice, or the decay corroding this entire industry." The audience applauded, but a Le Monde reporter asked directly, "Are you referring to Redford?" Brando did not answer, only smiled and shifted to another topic. Yet everyone understood perfectly. He didn't need to say another word. Brando's hostility didn't stop at words. Rumors suggested he had leveraged his press connections to sabotage Redford's roles at least twice. In 1980, as Redford prepared to release Ordinary People as a director, a series of critical reviews in the Village Voice and Variety simultaneously attacked the film, calling it fake, overly meticulous, and viewing life through the eyes of someone who has never suffered. An anonymous editor later revealed that Brando had been behind it, sending draft scripts, behind-the-scenes photos, and various rumors about Redford's near-pathological perfectionism during filming. Yet, the peak of their feud did not lie in media attacks. It erupted over women. The name that triggered the storm was Lisa Harrington, a dark-haired, gray-eyed actress who had quietly loved Brando for over a year. Lisa had always been private, never revealing romantic matters to the press, but suddenly appeared hand in hand with Redford at a Malibu charity party in 1973. Just a month later, Redford publicly escorted her on the New York red carpet as his rumored lover. And People magazine hailed them as Hollywood's golden couple. Brando said nothing. But shortly afterward, in a CBS interview, he unexpectedly delivered a cold remark. A bunch of bastards like to eat leftovers from others just to feel important. No names were mentioned, yet everyone knew exactly who he meant. Then in 1975, a small item in the San Francisco Chronicle caused months of uproar. An Oscar-winning actor is involved with a Sicilian-Italian actress. This relationship has lasted more than 3 years. Though no names were given, industry insiders immediately recognized the reference to Brando and Sal Mineo. Rumor had it that Lisa, after breaking up with Brando in heartbreak, revealed the secret to Redford in anger. Somehow, the information got out. Whether Redford intended it or not, in Brando's eyes, it was a double betrayal, losing a lover and having private matters exposed. From that moment on, Brando refused to forgive. He flatly declined any collaboration, even when Warner Brothers offered a record paycheck to have them both star in The Men and the Myth in 1983. Redford retaliated equally firmly, striking Brando's name from the casting list with a single handwritten note in black ink. Do not work with him, ever, not even in the same frame. This statement was later confirmed by director Alan Pakula in a 1991 conversation with Esquire. Some say Brando was a genius, but held grudges with lethal intensity. Others suggest Redford was too clean to tolerate a man as fiery as Brando. In truth, both were icons of opposing worlds, one embodying refined light, the other the chaotic darkness, the exposed guts of Hollywood itself. In his list of 7 people I could never forgive, Redford wrote Marlon Brando's name first, underlined twice in red ink. Not out of jealousy, but because he understood. Some wounds, though invisible, bleed for a lifetime. Yet the person who truly pushed Redford to the edge was not a man. After Clint, there emerged a true Hollywood queen. Someone who had written 3 handwritten letters asking to collaborate out of admiration. When rejected, she publicly humiliated Redford, calling him an arrogant coward in front of the entire film crew. 3. Barbra Streisand, the rage over Redford, refusing to star in a film she directed. Among the 7 names that Robert Redford wrote in red ink when he had reached the age of 88, only 2 were women. Yet there was only one name that made him utter a bitter remark: "I never want to see her name next to mine again." That woman was none other than Barbra Streisand, Hollywood's most legendary and extraordinarily talented figure, who had conquered the Oscars, Grammys, Tonys, Emmys, and even a Golden Globe for Best Director. She had been considered one of the most powerful faces in the entertainment industry throughout the 1970s to 1990s, while also being the person who caused Redford to lose friends, contracts, and even reputation, simply because he had dared to decline her offer outright. After the resounding success of the film The Way We Were, 1973, in which Redford and Streisand created an enchanting, opposites-attract on-screen couple, it was Barbra who nurtured the desire to reunite. In the late 1980s, she wrote the screenplay for The Prince of Tides, while also planning to direct it herself and play the lead female role. From the very first pages, she had specifically reserved the male lead for Redford. She sent him the script personally, accompanied by a soundtrack she had composed herself, a signed painting labeled "Your Katie," and a handwritten note with a sincere message: "No one but you." However, Redford refused decisively and coldly. He offered no explanation, simply sending a brief message through his assistant: "I do not act in films directed by Barbra. Please do not send anything further." Barbra remained silent, but the press quickly sensed the tension. In an interview with Entertainment Tonight, when asked why Redford was not part of the film, she responded in a sharply cold tone: "He's afraid, not of the character, but of me. He's uneasy with a woman behind the camera, afraid to step out of the comfort zone built by men." So, her statement immediately caused a media storm, becoming prominent headlines on the covers of People, Vanity Fair, and even Variety. Redford chose to remain silent, but behind the scenes, cracks began to appear. A Columbia Pictures producer later admitted, within just 3 weeks after that statement, Redford lost 2 contracts. Studios feared being drawn into a gender war. Streisand was incredibly powerful at the time, and she knew how to use the media to push her opponents down. The silent boycott lasted nearly a decade. Many directors avoided working with Redford, and producers were reluctant to sign contracts if both of them were involved. Barbra continually used sharp, suggestive remarks in interviews aimed at him. At the 1992 Oscar press conference, when The Prince of Tides received 7 nominations, but her name was absent in the Best Director category, Streisand coldly remarked, If this film had been directed by Redford, I'm sure he would have been nominated. But I am a woman, and I have dared to say no to some powerful people. That ambiguous remark immediately sparked rumors that Redford had quietly lobbied for her exclusion. A source from the Academy revealed that Redford had bluntly stated, "This film is not cinema. It is only a product of arrogance." Although the rumor was never verified, the consequences were evident. In 1995, when Vanity Fair invited legendary on-screen couples to reunite for a photo shoot, Streisand tore up Redford's photo right in front of the camera. A photographer present recalled, "She was completely serious. She stared at Redford's image, yanked it apart, tore it in half, and then laughed." As for Redford, he never publicly criticized Streisand. Yet close friends revealed that at a private party in 2002, he confided, "I have never hated someone simply because they are a woman. But Barbara is not merely a woman. She is a force of nature, and I did not want to live under that kind of power." In a list, supposedly rewritten in 2018, directly under Barbara Streisand's name, Redford added only one sentence: "The greatest disappointment of my life, because I once placed too much trust in her." 4. Jane Fonda, betraying Redford to compete for a role with his girlfriend. If Barbara Streisand had once made Robert Redford wary of the power wielded by a female director, Jane Fonda caused him a wound even deeper, a betrayal that seemed utterly impossible between two people who had considered each other kindred spirits. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the two had been a beloved on-screen pair, sharing the spotlight in 4 prominent films, including Barefoot in the Park and The Electric Horseman. Jane had never hidden the affection she felt for Redford, saying, "Robert is the only co-star who makes me feel safe and truly heard." On Redford's side, he had described Jane as a mind of intellect and a heart of absolute beauty. Yet all that goodness shattered, simply over a single role and a woman. The story began in 1999 when Redford was nurturing a plan to bring the film An Unfinished Love to the screen, a romantic movie adapted from a French novel he had cherished for over a decade. For this project, Redford intended to cast his then-girlfriend, French actress Clémence Poissy, in the lead role as a special gift and also as a ticket to launch her career in Hollywood. However, the role soon caught the attention of Jane Fonda, who had just decided to make a comeback after a long absence from acting. She continuously sent revised scripts, demo recordings, collaboration proposals, and even flew personally to Colorado to meet Redford under the pretense of seriously discussing cinematic artistry. Despite all this, Redford remained steadfast in his refusal. Not long after, a wave of sudden rumors appeared in American tabloids. Redford favors his girlfriend. The new film is nothing but a tool to elevate a young and beautiful lover. Or the veteran star sacrifices art for personal feelings. During a CNN talk show, when asked about Redford's choice of an inexperienced actress, Jane Fonda merely gave a slight smile and delivered a biting remark. "I think a director should choose the right person for the role, not someone they share a bed with every night." That statement struck Redford's pride like a knife, turning public opinion against him and quickly burying the project under criticism. No production company dared to invest, and ultimately an unfinished love had to be canceled. Redford remained silent, but according to The Hollywood Reporter, he personally wrote a letter to Jane, not to apologize, but to end a friendship that had lasted 4 decades. 3 years later, the truth gradually emerged. In a leaked internal investigation from WME, Jane Fonda's agency at the time, an email revealed that her manager had given the green light to spread rumors about Clémence Poissy, following instructions from superiors. When Redford learned of this, he stayed silent, but director Sidney Pollack, his close friend, recounted that Redford had once crumpled Jane's handwritten letter and thrown it into the fire in his private cabin in Utah, witnessed only by a housekeeper. Pollack always remembered his friend's words that day. "I never imagined the person who understood me the most would be the one to hurt me the deepest." From that day onward, Jane and Redford never met privately again. It wasn't until the press conference for Our Souls at Night in 2017, the film marking their belated reunion, that Redford stood beside Jane once more. When a reporter mentioned the past, he just smiled, though his eyes still carried sadness. "We were once friends, then colleagues, and now I'm not even sure what to call it anymore." In the red list that Redford wrote in 2018, right next to Jane Fonda's name, only 3 words were underlined. Trust was killed. 5. Paul Newman, the friend who seemed close but was never truly near. The 5th person on the list that no one would have expected is Paul Newman. The man the entire world believed Robert Redford cherished most, the one whom the press for decades continuously referred to with phrases like artistic soulmate and Redford's only true confidant. They were once an immortal duo in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, and The Sting, 1973. 2 films that not only redefined the buddy action genre, but also immortalized a legendary friendship between 2 of the most handsome gentlemen of the 20th century. However, there was a truth the audience would never see: the cold distance between them behind the scenes, where cameras and applause no longer existed. For 40 years, they never once shared a private dinner. No messages, no handwritten letters, nor a single real-life hug. What the public witnessed was merely the perfect performance of 2 actors, masters at playing the glamorous game of Hollywood. In a 1995 interview with The Guardian, Redford once blurted out, "Paul makes me feel like I'm never good enough." On the surface, it sounded like admiration, but beneath it lay exhaustion, disillusionment, and a lifetime overshadowed by the immense presence of someone regarded as a friend. From the 1970s, when Redford began pursuing a career as a director, almost every door seemed to close in his face. Time and again, the responses he received were cold. "Newman has already read the script," or "Paul fits this role better." Sometimes it was even simpler: "Redford doesn't have the box office appeal that Newman does." Yet the harshest blow came at a party in Beverly Hills in 1976. When Redford was no more than 3 steps away from Newman, he overheard his friend laughing and saying to a studio executive he should stand behind the camera and wipe the sweat of those who actually know how to act. Redford silently turned away. From that moment, he knew he was no longer the boy who had admired Paul Newman on stage. He had become a rival who would never be acknowledged. By 1980, when Ordinary People, directed by Redford, unexpectedly won at the Oscars, surpassing all predictions, Newman was the only one absent from any of the celebration parties. When asked why, he casually replied, with a dry smile, "I need a break from things I couldn't do." Nevertheless, Redford still tried to maintain the relationship. In 2001, he invited Newman to join an independent post-war film, a script that Redford himself had written for both of them in their twilight years. No response. A few months later, in an interview with Vanity Fair, Newman coldly remarked, "What could be more shameful than two old men trying to reenact the past?" Redford chose silence. But according to his personal assistant, he drank whiskey every night for 10 consecutive days without touching a single script. All of this was just the prelude to the final blow. In 2008, 3 days after Paul Newman passed away, Redford received a phone call. On the other end was Newman's longtime personal secretary. Her voice choked. "You need to know. Paul left a handwritten list, and you are the very last name." It was a list written in red ink, consisting of 7 people Newman hated most in his life. And Redford, whom the world assumed was a kindred spirit, was at the very bottom. Why did Newman hate him so intensely? Rumor has it that Newman always believed Redford lived off his own glow. Meanwhile, Redford felt that Newman had stolen everything, from opportunities and recognition to the most coveted handshakes from top directors. Some even say that between them, there had once been an unspoken agreement: never appear together at private premieres, in order to preserve the image of the perfect pair in the eyes of the public. A brilliant marketing strategy, yet ultimately hollow to the extreme. By 2018, Redford created his own blacklist as a way to close the past. 7 names. 7 mortal enemies. But when it came to the section for Paul Newman, he left it blank. Nothing written. No period. No description. Just a silent void. Because sometimes the deepest pain does not come from betrayal, but from the feeling of never having truly been friends and never having been forgiven. 6. Tom Cruise turns Redford's film into a self-promotion tool. From the very beginning, Robert Redford had no intention of collaborating with Tom Cruise. The reason was not that he underestimated Cruise's talent. On the contrary, it was precisely because Cruise was so outstanding, so controlling, and so accustomed to turning any film he participated in into his own personal stage. However, in 2007, Redford had no other choice but to yield. After a series of tense negotiations with United Artists, where Cruise held the role of co-executive, he was forced to allow the actor to join Lions for Lambs, the political film directed by Redford, in which he also took on the lead role and co-wrote the script. Initially, Redford envisioned this as a serious, reflective, and educational work, delving deeply into the ethics of war and civic responsibility. But for Cruise, it became a rare opportunity to reinvent his personal image after a series of scandals involving his religious beliefs, marital issues, and heavily criticized ties to Scientology. As soon as filming began, Cruise arrived with a personal team even larger than the director's crew. From image consultants, speechwriters, PR assistants, to a post-production specialist stationed permanently in the editing room. At first, Redford thought this was just a modern Hollywood working style. But soon, he realized that the script was being interfered with and revised daily. Cruise's scenes were given more screen time, and his lines were continuously added with philosophical but vague content, the type of statements he frequently used to create viral media buzz. Worse still, during an internal press conference, Cruise even suggested changing the official poster. Instead of the image of the three main characters positioned in balance, he wanted a tilted close-up of his own face, a distant gaze accompanied by the slogan, "Courage is contagious." Redford was stunned. He had to speak up immediately in front of the entire crew. "This is my film, not your election campaign." But Cruise seemed hardly concerned. He had already scheduled more than 20 talk show appearances before the film's release, and during all of them, he never once mentioned Redford. At that time, Variety published a short article titled, "Did Tom Cruise Save Robert Redford from Obscurity?" A direct blow to the pride of the cinematic legend. In magazines, Redford's name was pushed down to the third line in the creative team credits, while Cruise appeared repeatedly with statements like, "I always choose projects that matter, and Lions for Lambs is a voice from my heart." Industry insiders understood quietly that Cruise had no real interest in the film's message. He only needed a tool to restore his status, while all of America doubted him as a fanatic, a controlling husband, and a public façade. Redford's anger reached its peak when the studio organized a private screening exclusively for sponsors and right-wing politicians in Washington, D.C., entirely excluding his name. According to the New Yorker, that very evening, Redford called the studio's director directly and coldly said, "Remove my name from the promotional campaign. If they want to use the film for personal purposes, let them. I am no longer part of this farce." Immediately afterward, he canceled all interviews. In a conversation with his close friend, director Alan Pekla, Redford bitterly admitted, "That was the first time I directed a film and felt like just a supporting actor in my own work." Yet, few would have guessed that the person who made Redford feel even more outraged than Cruise was someone who had once been romantically involved with his girlfriend. A famous actor known as a heartbreaker who had been with half of Hollywood. When Redford unexpectedly discovered a secret powerful enough to destroy both his reputation and marriage, he panicked and turned away. And that person was none other than Warren Beatty. 7. Warren Beatty, turning away after a secret was exposed. In Robert Redford's eyes, Warren Beatty was once regarded as a brilliant yet perilous shadow of Hollywood. The two men were the same age. Both possessed tall and commanding physiques, carried themselves with calm elegance, and delivered performances with irresistible charm. They consistently ranked among the actors that directors had to carefully consider before assigning leading roles, as both were far too captivating to share the spotlight simultaneously. Nevertheless, Redford had never truly harbored resentment toward Beatty. Until one summer in 1976, when he inadvertently discovered a shocking secret that Beatty had painstakingly concealed for nearly a decade. At that time, Redford was dating a young actress who was starting to gain attention. She was invited to audition for a major political project produced by Beatty himself, a film titled Shampoo. However, immediately after returning from the audition, she broke down in tears. She recounted that Beatty had never allowed her to perform any scenes, but instead kept pressing her with questions. "Do you know anyone who has ever seen Redford at a male actor's house?" Or, "Has Redford ever mentioned anyone who helped him escape a past homosexual scandal?" Her account left Redford stunned. Not only did he feel deeply insulted, but he also realized that Beatty was attempting to dredge up a chapter of his past that he had carefully kept hidden for many years, specifically a trip to New York in the winter of 1968, during which Redford had stayed 3 nights at the apartment of a male screenwriter who later died young from a drug overdose. Redford did not make a public scene, but quietly he began investigating on his own. Through a close friend working in the PR department at Warner Brothers, and he uncovered the truth. It had been Beatty who approved the publication of an anonymous article suggesting that Redford was torn between 2 emotional orientations and had special connections with 2 famous male faces in the film industry during the 1960s. Although the article was removed after just 1 week, the consequences were severe. Redford lost the lead role in Apocalypse Now. The director had chosen Martin Sheen instead, fearing that Redford would bring unwanted controversy. Instead of confronting Beatty openly, Redford invited him to dinner at his Santa Monica home, thinking it might be an opportunity to reconcile. But when Redford placed a copy of the article in front of Beatty and asked, "Do you know who wrote this?" Beatty remained silent. After a few minutes, he stood up, set his glass of wine down, and coldly remarked, "You should watch your own past before blaming others." With that, he left. From that point on, there was no phone call, no explanation, and even when they crossed paths at award ceremonies, they would not look at each other. In 1981, Redford nearly received an Oscar nomination for Brubaker, but the campaign was withdrawn at the last minute. Later, an anonymous producer who had supported the campaign revealed, "A powerful individual called and demanded that Redford should not represent a political film. His image is not as pristine as he has been portraying." Redford never publicly disclosed the culprit's name, but he fully understood that when a recording of that call was delivered to his lawyer several years later, the voice on the line belonged to Warren Beatty. Redford completely withdrew from the world for 3 months after announcing his retirement. He cut off all contact by turning off his phone, refusing to meet with the media, and not sharing that list with anyone. Until one day, he quietly sent it through the mail, enclosing only a small piece of paper with a handwritten note. "This is something I have never dared to confess in the past 60 years. Which of the 7 names do you think caused Redford the deepest pain? And if you were in his position, would you have the courage to write such a list? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss the upcoming videos.